My father bought a cabin with his brother in upstate New York, in the Adirondack Mountains. He's always been a huge hunter for almost the entirety of his life. He and his brother wanted a new feel for hunting. The hunting in Newton Ransom, Pennsylvania became stale for the both of them, and they wanted a new thrill for their hunting adventures. The cabin they purchased was 4 miles up a huge mountain that was called Page Mountain. The mountain was far away from any sort of civilization. Not even the radio worked that far up there. Anyone who visited was completely alone with themselves, with no help to be found if something bad were to happen. Starting in the spring of 1983, my father and uncle spent almost every weekend preparing for the hunt coming up that November. They tirelessly worked every day as they had a lot to do and little time to do it. They had to split firewood for warmth, build gates for security, create trails to walk on, and make repairs to the cabin. The work took them months to complete, but finally they were ready for their fall hunt. The very first season was a huge success. They both shot a deer with a rack over 10 points and came home with smiles on their faces. The next year, my mother asked if we could plan a short family trip for about 4 days to the cabin to enjoy the fall foliage. The assortment of the autumn colors was really something to admire and love. My father agreed, and we got ready to go on vacation. My mother wanted the whole family to go, including my father, my sister Elizabeth, her husband Ross, my nephew Owen, and of course, myself, Jeff. My sister and I had quite the age gap between us. She was 15 years older than me. Owen was 10 years old at the time. I was really getting into photography. I was sure to bring my brand new camera with me as I could get great shots of nature while we were there. We got ready for the trip, and we all packed into my father's 4-door pickup truck to save money on gas. There wasn't much leg room and the entire car was cramped. We packed our luggage and my dog, old Hank, in the back. He was a good hunting dog, but his days were numbered. He didn't bark much anymore, run, or anything. He was becoming a grumpy old man, but we still brought him. We didn't want to leave him alone all weekend. We drove along the highway for what seemed like an eternity because of how uncomfortable the car was. At this point, everyone was silent because we were all getting on each other's nerves, and we were in close quarters. Not a sound could be heard the whole ride except for the staticky radio playing country music. After driving for hours, we finally made it to the base of the mountain which the cabin was atop of. It was nearing dark when we first started up the mountain. We were all becoming restless because we were all cramped in the car and were ready to get out. About 15 minutes into the drive up the mountain, I saw a huge pile of guts right off the path of the road in a ditch. And when I looked farther into the woods about 20 yards off, I saw what looked like the body of a skinned deer. It gave me the creeps as I wasn't really a fan of blood and gore, but I didn't think much of it because we were in the middle of hunting grounds where stuff like that happens all the time. We finally made it to the road our cabin was on. My father had to get out to unlock the gate leading to it. I had glanced to my left, and I saw what looked like the head of a moose in the forest. I got super excited and tried to find my camera to snap a picture, but it was in the back of the truck with the rest of the luggage. My father hopped back into the car, and we finally made it to the cabin. We all jumped out and stretched, very happy that we had finally made it. We opened the cabin doors and saw that the place was one giant open room, and there were only 3 beds, which meant that I had to sleep on the hard, uncomfortable couch. Everyone went and laid on their respective beds. Old Hank jumped up on the end of my parents' bed. My dad made a fire and then laid down like everyone else. While everyone was planning on taking a short rest and then unpacking the truck and their luggage, they instead fell asleep for the night. I, however, could not. The couch prevented me from doing so. So to pass the time, I decided to go out to the truck and get my camera to set it up, to get it ready for the next day. I went outside with my flashlight that was working poorly. The light flickered on and off, which was just enough for me to locate my camera in the back and grab it. Just as I grabbed my bag, the light stopped working completely, so I had to feel my way back to the cabin. About halfway there, I felt an eerie presence to the left of me, and I looked over and stared into the black of night. As I stared, I heard the sound of a hoof hitting the ground, and I figured that it was the moose, and I thought it would be perfect to get a picture. I pointed my camera where I believed the moose was, and snapped a photo. The flash illuminated the night, and I was able to see the antlers. As soon as I took the picture, the creature ran away into the night. I proceeded to go back into the cabin. After tossing and turning all night on that uncomfortable couch, I was finally able to sleep. That morning, I was the last to wake up, and woke to the smell and sound of crackling bacon. My father was cooking breakfast, and my mother was taking a shower. My sister, nephew, and brother-in-law were out exploring the trails that my uncle and father created prior to the trip. I woke up and immediately went outside to see if there was any evidence of what I might have seen last night. Sure enough, there were tracks on the side of the cabin. It was strange though, because there was only 2 hoof marks instead of 4. Maybe the ground was just hard in areas and the tracks didn't show up. Later that day, my mother and I decided to take the truck and go to town to get some supplies. We were ill-prepared because my mother did not realize how far away from civilization we would be. While in town, we bought various things to help us, such as flashlights, lighters, winter coats, etc. As we walked out of the store, I noticed someone across the street approximately 40 yards away. It looked like a Native American man, and he seemed to be waving and yelling at me, but no words came out of his mouth. When I turned to my mother to point out the man, he was gone. I figured he just ran off and was trying to talk to someone else. I didn't say too much about it to my mom, because she's easily spooked and would get paranoid. I would save myself the stress and just not really say anything else. We made it back to the cabin after being gone for about 3 hours, and everyone was having a good time. My nephew was telling me all about the cool trails and animals he spotted, while my sister and her husband were taking a nap. My father was outside preparing a bonfire for us for later that night, so we could relax and roast marshmallows and whatnot. I took a walk on the trails, taking pictures of animals and birds, while the rest of my family stayed back at the cabin. It started nearing dusk, and my family was getting ready to start the bonfire, so as I made my way back, I heard trotting in the woods, and immediately got excited as I thought it could be that moose again. They were quite rare to spot in the Adirondack Mountains, but for some reason, it kept revealing itself to me. I got my camera ready to take the picture, but I couldn't spot it. It must have run off. By the time I made it back to the cabin, it was already pitch black out, but I could see my family gathered around the bonfire, so I joined them. We had a good time. We were telling stories, both comical and scary, while roasting our marshmallows and making s'mores. We eventually grew silent. The only thing we could hear was the crackling of the fire. But then we all heard a grunt from the woods. Excitedly, my father pointed his flashlight in the direction of the grunt, but we couldn't see anything. Then we all heard trotting, and slowly the trotting got quieter and quieter as it made its way farther into the woods. My mom, being paranoid, freaked out and demanded that everyone get back into the cabin. We all tried to reassure her, telling her that it was just a moose or a deer and to not be worried, but she wouldn't listen. She said she had a weird feeling and just felt uncomfortable staying outside, so to make her happy, we made our way back inside the cabin. They went to their respective beds and I went to my couch. I must have adjusted to it because I was able to fall asleep quite quickly. During the night, I woke up to go outside to the outhouse, and when I opened the cabin door, the Native American man I saw the day prior was outside. It seemed like he was waiting for me. This time I got a good look at his face. He had long black hair with feathers sticking out of it, and his face was covered with what looked like war paint. He had a glare that pierced my soul. He motioned for me to follow him, and for some unknown reason, I did. I have no idea why. He took me to an old trail that was overgrown and hard to travel on. Anytime I asked him where we were going, he would not answer. He stayed completely silent. After what seemed like an hour of walking, he pointed at some loose dirt and made a gesture like he wanted me to dig. When I asked him why, he became more intense with his actions and angry, and so I started digging. After I dug for about 10 minutes, I felt something. It felt like skin, but something was wrong with it. It was like I was touching a chicken breast. It was slimy and gross. When I pulled it out, it was the skinned body of a small creature, and I freaked out and threw it. And when I looked at the Native American man, he began flipping out and yelling in his native tongue, making gestures to leave. And then I woke up. It was morning, and my father was doing the same thing as he was the day before, cooking breakfast. I was very shaken by this entire event, but I told myself that it was only a nightmare. That day went by pretty much the same as the day before. We walked down some different trails and ended the night with a bonfire. Eventually, we all went back inside to go to bed. Late in the night, old Hank got very anxious, as if he had to go to the bathroom, so I opened the cabin door and let him out. While I was out there, I figured I should go to the bathroom too, and made my way about 30 yards over to the outhouse. As I opened the door to the outhouse, I heard Hank howl like he was chasing a rabbit, and then I heard him run away. I quickly went to go chase after him with my flashlight. I followed his howls. I heard him go off the road and onto an old path that was overgrown and hard to follow. I couldn't keep up with him. I was having deja vu. I felt like I knew where I was going. After a while, his howling stopped, but I continued along the path. I was getting really scared because I recognized where I was. I was here before. Eventually, I came across some loose dirt. Remembering the dream, I started digging with my hands, and I found old Hank completely gutted and skinned. I screamed in terror, and then I heard what sounded like my mother screaming for help. I started running, trying to avoid the trees and rocks as I ran. I heard her voice getting closer and closer, and I yelled out for her to come to me, but there was no response. I turned the corner of a huge rock and I saw it. It was screaming for help and sounded exactly like my mom. It was right in front of me. I became paralyzed as I stared in fear at this creature towering over me, standing about 10 feet tall with huge antlers and the head of a moose. But its head was completely skinless. It was pure white bone. It was standing on its hind legs. Its front 2 legs were long, and at the end of them, instead of hooves, it had long claws. Its chest was completely exposed, with no hair or even skin. I saw directly into its body, but there was nothing there, no organs or anything. It was just an empty rib cage. He swiped at me, and I fell backwards and hit the ground hard. I awoke later in a dark cave, but I still had my flashlight. My head was throbbing. I looked at the walls in front of me. There were words written in blood. "Please help us." I started looking around the cave and noticed there was blood everywhere, big pools of it on the ground. I looked up above me and saw 5 skinned bodies strung up. I had to get out of here. I searched the cave and found an opening and ran for my life. As I escaped the trees, I discovered our cabin directly in front of me. I went inside, and there was blood everywhere. Once again, I heard my mother screaming for help in the distance. I ignored it and ran to the truck with the keys. I struggled to get them into the ignition because my hands were shaking so much, but I got it started and hit the gas. Behind me, I heard the trotting of the creature, but I was going to make it because the sound of the trotting was getting quieter as I distanced myself from the cabin. But up ahead, I saw the gate. It was closed. I rushed out of my car to open it and felt a slash across my back. I turned over and saw the creature standing over me, and then it took another swipe at my throat. I wake up in the cave that I escaped. Everything seems so small. I'm towering above everything. I look down to discover my arms have turned into legs with claws, and my chest is exposed with nothing inside of it. I feel nothing but pure hatred, and this feeling of insatiable hunger. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. Send your story or creepypasta to the email in the description. My shirts, Patreon, Instagram, and Twitter, and Discord are down there too. Anything you do to help support the channel is much appreciated. Likes and up. Be good to animals, even people. Sit.
Ja, snälla, Bergsbus, Rish.